Welcome to the Space for Grace podcast, a place where you can come as you are, hear genuine conversations about women's holistic health, and leave educated, inspired, and encouraged about your health and fitness journey. Get ready to find freedom to flourish in your physical, mental, and spiritual health. I'm your host, MK, and I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Space for Grace. Hey guys, welcome back to the Space for Grace podcast. Today I'm so excited to have a conversation with Miss Sarah. Sarah is a writer sharing her life online, specifically encouraging kingdom-minded women to take the pressure off their very beautiful lives. Sarah loves to hear women talk about the God-sized dream in their hearts and often gets the joy of walking with women at the beginning stages of those dreams. Sarah is working on starting her own podcast, and in the meantime, you can find her on Instagram at Sarah Cruzel, Kruzel, and find her writing on Substack. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you, MK. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So excited to have you today and to talk about what you're passionate about, taking the pressure off. So that's what we're talking about today, taking the pressure off. And I would love to just start with asking you how that message came to be in your life and where that came from.
Yeah, I would love to share that. I write about taking the pressure off a lot because it was birthed out of a season of my own life where I was just really struggling with a lot of anxiety. And there was a lot of external voices in my life at the time. There's a lot of opinions about things I should or shouldn't be doing, choices I should or shouldn't be making, even just internal voices of trying to people please and make a lot of people happy. And so it was really just out of a season where I was really struggling with high anxiety. And I am a woman of faith. I am a Christian, and just in my time with the Lord, He started really just revealing that I was feeling so much pressure, and that wasn't put on me by Him. Mm-hmm. And the more that I just really started to sit with Him in it, and there's a radical story of me getting delivered from wild panic attacks during that season, which is also a huge part of where this came from. But it was just sitting with the Lord, honestly, MK, and just asking Him, okay, is this what you think? Is this your opinion of me? Is this what I should be doing? And He really started just taking the pressure off my own shoulders of I haven't put this on you. I haven't put this expectation on you. And the more that I started to live in freedom from that, the more I looked around to my neighbors, to women in my church and my friends and the youth girls that I get to mentor at our church, and my coworkers and people I would meet at networking events. And just the narrative that women were talking about was so pressure driven. Even just talking about introducing themselves, I could just see all of this pressure on their face, that they were trying to figure out the right things to say. They were trying to figure out do I fit in here? Right. Just all these different voices of pressure. And I'm wait, this is not what the Lord has put on us. There is nothing in His word that says we have to live like this. This is not it. And so again, just went back to the Lord and started sitting with Him. And I feel like the Lord really just started to show me that this is almost like a scheme of the enemy, if I'm really honest. It's a way to get our eyes off the throne, to look at each other, to look inward at ourselves too much, to be overly critical, even to perceive what other people are thinking, even if that's not actually what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. And it just gets us in this almost habitual cycle of looking at each other and looking at ourselves too much. And that's not actually looking at the throne of grace. And it's not actually asking the Lord what He thinks. And it's just causing all this pressure that might not even really be there. And so that's kind of where this message was birthed from. Honestly, MK was just a season of my own really high anxiety. And then finding out that the Lord was this is not pressure that I've put on you. And then noticing that in other women too. So that's kind of where I became passionate about sharing this message. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. And that's
Yeah.
such a relatable message. Like you were saying, you went through it personally, but then you saw that everyone else was going through it.
Yeah. And even if they weren't like dealing with like panic attacks like I was, right? Like the pressure that I was feeling got me to that point, but not everyone deals with that level of anxiety or pressure, like emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But even just like text I'll get from like youth girls before they come over to my house, like, is it okay if I wear sweatpants? And I'm like, yes, please wear sweatpants and come to my house in your sweatpants. I don't care. Like pressure to like write, I don't know, even just like wear the right thing to an event or like say the right thing in your elevator pitch or like pressure to be at a certain life stage by a certain age or pressure to make a certain amount of money or pressure to I don't know, like I don't know. It just carries into so many things, but yeah,
Where do you
it's
think
just all over the place.
it is? It really is. So where do you think that most of these, because you said the Lord revealed, like, this is not my voice. This is not me putting all this pressure on you. So where do you think the sources or some of the most
Yeah.
common sources of the
Yeah.
pressure are coming from?
That's such a good question. I kind of see it as like kind of like three major categories, but that could probably be broken down into more. I honestly I see a lot of like external pressure. So that's like Aunt Karen telling you what you should wear for that event or what your wedding dress needs to look like, or do you have a boyfriend yet? Like it's external pressure. So that could even be like in your group of friends, like them thinking you shouldn't take that new job. Like it's external people, so other people's opinions about what you should or shouldn't do, or their approval or their expectations. So it's external pressure is one of them. I would say internal pressure is the other one. So that could be just like your inner monologue, like the inner thoughts that you're having. So it could be like when you're getting ready in the morning and you're putting on makeup and you have like a pimple and you're like, okay, I have to put extra concealer on because I don't want anyone to know. That's like internal pressure to like look a certain way. But we all think that, right? We literally all think about stuff like that. Or it could be internal pressure like, oh, I was like 2 minutes late. It was like I was 2 minutes late to work today and I still haven't put creamer in my coffee and I'm so tired. And if I don't have this assignment done by this time, or if my professor doesn't like respond to my email, like I must have done something wrong or they must not like me, or it's just like that internal monologue that can sometimes be as simple as like, I don't know, it can be as small as, well, I hope they don't notice blank, or it can be as big as like, oh, if I don't do X, so and so isn't going to like approve of me. And I think that that's more like an internal dialogue. It's just like the things that your thoughts are saying. I think that can depend on who you are. I think that depends on your personality. I think that depends on kind of how the Lord has wired you. But I think that those are two big categories. So like internal and external pressure. And then there is like this almost third kind of more elusive category of like perceived pressure. And I think that that can both be internal and external, but that's like what you think other people are thinking, or like the perceived expectations or the perceived things. So like Aunt Karen didn't actually say I had to wear that to my wedding, but I think Aunt Karen thinks that. Right. Oh, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like that assumption of like what you think people think or care about. And that can go down to like body image. That can be about any of the things we've talked about on any of the examples, but it's just like this perceived internal external pressure. And I think that perception, that perception is usually internal. Like you're probably not like saying those things out loud, but it's not coming from a place of actual reality or truth. Like no one actually said, don't do that thing, or, hey, I don't like it when, like, you're just assuming that that's what they're thinking. So for example, I give an example about perceived pressure. I have a friend who's applying for a bunch of jobs right now, and she wants to get out of her current job, and she is working on her resume, working on cover letters, working on networking, updating her LinkedIn, like doing all the things, right? Like what all the things you have to do when you want a new job. Well, she found this job that was going to make like double what she's making. She's well qualified for it. But there's like a couple things that she's like, I don't know if I'm actually qualified for that. So I'm not gonna apply. And I was like, but I asked her, I was like, but why? Like, why aren't you gonna apply for that? She was like, well, because like I'm just not qualified for that like one thing. Or like I don't know how to do that. And I was like, girly, like I wonder if that's like you perceiving that they aren't going to like even look at your resume. Like you're taking yourself out of the running before you even know the answer is no.
Yeah.
Like that's like a perceived pressure of like, I'm not going to do it because I'm going to take myself out of the running because I think so and so is going to think that I'm not good enough, right? And I think as women, that's so easy to do. I don't know.
There's so many implications of that. Like you in a friendship or in a marriage or really
Yeah.
any relationship, if you are finding yourself trying to figure out what they're gonna want or think or need before
Yeah.
they've told you, you're taking I think it's called in like the counseling world over accountability.
Yeah. Like false responsibility or over accountability.
Yes. False
Yeah.
responsibility is another good way to put it. And so that causes all sorts of issues in
Yeah.
that relationship, in that friendship, when you're, and I think it comes from a deeper place of self-protection a lot of times.
Yeah.
You find
100%.
that. That could be one of the roots. Um, I know for me in college, when I was dealing with kind of the same thing of high anxiety, internal pressure to be perfect with school and serving at church and all the different things I was doing and my health and, how I wanted to look, and then perceived
Mm-hmm.
pressure from parents, from teachers,
Yeah.
friends, and then the real external pressure that there is, like there are certain
Yeah.
expectations that people have of us that we want to live up to, but
Yeah.
when
Totally.
when you feel like it's coupled with this perfectionism of if I don't live up to all of these things, so like it won't
Yeah.
be okay and the world's gonna
Yeah.
end,
Yeah.
like
That
that's
perfectionism, I'm glad you
scary.
brought that up. I'm glad you brought up perfectionism, MK, because I think like perfectionism is a root for a lot of pressure like that you're
Mhm.
feeling, because you're right, there is like a real expectation that people have and people will tell you what they expect, right? And
Mhm.
then there is like real internal pressure of like I have to meet that goal or that deadline or that achievement or whatever, right? Like that's real. But then there is also this like perfectionism, and I know that not everybody struggles with perfectionism, but I think for a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot more women than I even knew before I started writing about this topic do.
Mhm.
And I find it a lot in even like the creative space. So people who are starting a podcast, people who are writing a song, who are starting a blog, people who have an actual like fine art medium, people who are dancers, people who are doing something like that, um, almost feel like they can't put something into the world until it's perfect because it doesn't have value. But like perfectionism and value aren't at war with each other. Like the Lord didn't say like, hey, like you have to be perfect for me to use you. He didn't say like, hey, your art has to be perfect, your body has to be perfect, your marriage has to be perfect. Like he never said any of that. Like those words are not in the Bible.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So I think you're right that perfectionism is like at the root of a lot of things.
definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
What are some common areas that you see women putting way too much pressure on themselves? We've touched on a
Yeah.
lot of them already, but do you also have some practical, maybe steps for them to start thinking
Yeah.
through how to take the pressure off?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of noticing, right? Like I think it's a matter for every woman to like look at, okay, where externally do I feel pressure to prove, to strive, to perform?
Mhm.
Where internally do I hear the voices of proving, striving, performing? And then from there, it's like, okay, so, to answer your question for like categories, I think we talked about a lot of them. So there's like body image, there's health, there's life stage, like having kids or getting married by a certain age or having a
Definitely.
promotion by a certain age. I think that's a big one that women struggle with. Sometimes it's pressure in friendship, pressure to be a certain kind of friend, or pressure to have a really some women feel like a pressure to have like a really close deep circle. Some people find that they have like this pressure to like want a whole bunch of friends. Some people feel pressure around like hosting friends or family in their home. Like my house has to be immaculately clean. I have to have like a 5-course meal. Like there can't be any dust anywhere. Like so it could be that. It could be pressure around how to raise your kids. It could be pressure around how to communicate with new moms who might raise their kids really different, but they're still your friends. It could be pressure around communicating around election season. It could be pressure. I mean, we could go on forever. It could be pressure in your creative medium. Like it's so many things. And I guess when I was originally working through my own anxiety, it was pressure on my wedding. But I think that like, it's one of those things where you just have to stop and notice, okay, what is the thing that I'm feeling pressure about? Is it actually like, is it actually that I'm not going to be a good friend? No, it's not, because I know I'm a good friend, but it's that this person might perceive me differently. So then it's like taking the pressure off and being like, okay, in friendship, okay, I'm going to take the pressure off this friendship with this girl, and I'm going to pursue her, and I'm going to remind her that I love her, and that I'm going to show up to her house with flowers after she got into grad school, and I'm going to celebrate her and not worry about like what she's going to say, because if she is upset at me, she'll tell me, and just trusting my friends that they're going to like communicate. Like we're adults, like just trust them that they're going to tell you if something's off. If it's about money, taking the pressure off, having conversations, whether that's with a spouse or like a financial advisor or someone who does like financial coaching, to be like, okay, like what are actual realistic goals? Like I'm going to take the pressure off of this. I'm trying to have healthier habits around this thing. But I also don't want to be like wildly so strict that there's no grace, right? So what can we do in the meantime? Like what's my fun money budget? And then what am I going to spend that on?
Right.
Or for me right now, it's a lot of like creative like things. So I'm working on starting a podcast. And for a while I was like, okay, I can't do anything with this podcast until I never say, I never say like, I never have like, like words, filler words, until I have the right microphone, all these things. And the Lord smacked me upside the head. And he was like, you say that you are Little Miss President of the Take the Pressure Off Club, and you're putting so much pressure on yourself. Sarah, Irene, stop it. And so the way I'm fighting that is literally by recording voice memos when I'm driving around in my car. I'll have like hands-free or like in my headphones or something, and I'll start recording voice memos. And it's every podcaster's worst nightmare, right? To have background noise. And what more background noise are you going to get than when you're in your car driving around? You're going to get keys. You're going to get the AC. You're going to get the siren going by. You're going to get the motorcycle revving its engine, right? And so for me right now, it's taking the pressure off that and like posting voice memos on the internet to prove that you can do creative things that are still valuable. So
I love that.
I think that that's maybe like the practical end of it, is I think it's just different for everything.
Yeah. And asking that question, like, okay, what if it's not perfect? What if I'm not perfect in this area? What's going to happen?
What's going to happen?
Maybe doing something that's not perfect. Is
the world going to end?
Right. Because we make it out to be that way in our heads, like it has to be perfect or else this horrible thing. And I think that's where anxiety comes from, is like, what if things that haven't happened yet in the future?
It's future casting for sure. Yeah, that's so good.
So it's like, what if I just put these voice memos out there that aren't perfect?
Right.
They still are going to have value. Someone's still going to be blessed by it. What if I'm not perfect in this friendship? And then give that friend a chance to still show up for you and prove to you that, okay, maybe it won't always be perfect, but maybe sometimes they'll still show up.
That's for you. Good.
Because
that's so good.
I think healing like happens. So we get hurt in relationships. Normally hurt comes from people hurting people, because we're not perfect. But healing also comes from being in relationship and being in community.
That's
And
so
so
good.
another thing I was thinking about when you were talking is when we put pressure on ourselves to be perfect, like for example, having people over, you feel a pressure for your house to be perfect.
Mhm.
That almost creates a space where it's not safe for other people to
Yeah,
be imperfect.
exactly.
But when you're willing to show up in your
Yeah.
mess, your beautiful mess and your imperfection
Yes.
and be vulnerable, that creates a
Yeah.
space for other people around you to feel safe to
Hmm.
be themselves, safe to be
Yeah.
imperfect and to be
I
vulnerable.
think that's so true. And I literally saw that like play out in real life a couple weeks ago. We had Danny was officiating, Danny's my husband. Danny was officiating a wedding for this engaged couple that we're good friends with, and we had them over for dinner. But I got off work late and I like ran home and like shoved all their like the shoes by our door like in a closet, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm trying to like finish all this food, right?" And we had them over. We have a tiny little townhouse, and our kitchen table is like in our kitchen.
Hmm.
It's like there isn't like a separate space. Like it is cooking and eating in the same like little square room. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to put all this pressure to have like all these dishes from cooking dinner clean. Like, I'm not going to have all this pressure to like have like a perfectly immaculate like tablescape. It's okay if we eat on paper plates tonight and we just toss them in the trash. Like, I don't love to do that, but I'm like, it's fine because I was running late. Danny had gotten off work late and we're having people over. And honestly, it was like one of the best nights of conversation. Like, they were so gracious. They're like, "Oh my gosh, welcome to our life. This is exactly how this is exactly how it is in the US too. Like, thank you for being real and normal. Like, thank you for not like living in a museum." And I was like, okay. So that's just like some fruit of it, honestly, going back to like
Yeah.
creating a safe place for people to feel like they can also take the pressure off.
Yeah.
I literally watched that play out in my life last 2 weeks ago. So,
That's such a good example. I
yeah.
love it. So this whole time, as you've been sharing, I've kind of been thinking about this idea that I want to ask you
Mm-hmm.
um, about like self-acceptance because
Mm-hmm.
it's or where we get our because we always all want to belong and be accepted, and I feel like we put pressure to people please or be
Mm-hmm.
perfect or whatever to feel like we have that sense of acceptance or belonging or I'm enough, I'm
Yeah.
good enough. So, have you found that to be true? And I guess how would you encourage someone
Yeah.
to find that confidence in the
Yeah.
Lord, in themselves, not looking to all these outward,
Right. Right.
weight or
Right.
outward acceptance?
That's
Does that
such a,
make sense?
yeah, I think so. And I think that's such a beautiful and like humble, honest question because I think most women know the answer. Most women of faith probably know the answer to that and know the practicals to get there. I'm not assuming that anyone listening to this podcast is a Christian, so I want to speak to both. That there is it's kind of twofold, right? That there's a noticing of like, where do I not feel accepted? And
Mhm.
it's probably not going to be hard for you to answer that question. Because if you're feeling like you don't belong somewhere, you're going to notice. And is it a matter of trying to strive to fit in there? No, it is a matter of choosing not to dull yourself and choosing not to be someone you're not, choosing the honest route, um, choosing the honest path to, and if it's a place of, I don't belong here, then that's worth noticing.
Mhm.
For Christian women, and I pray that this is not just like cliche advice, but I think getting a really strong awareness sense of what does God actually say about who I am and who does God say that he is going to be the catalyst towards confidence for self-acceptance, but
Yeah.
also like as Christians, our call is to die to self, right? We are called, right, to die to ourself It's not about our thoughts. It's not about our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. And so the catalyst for getting to a place of confidence and self-acceptance is actually like being accepted by the Heavenly Father and coming to a deep understanding, revelation, and realization that in every room you walk in, you have the authority of Christ living inside of you, that he is the one who calls you. He is the one who puts dreams and vision in your heart. He's the one who gives you creativity. He's the one who supplies your every need. He's the one who it is by his power that we are able to almost, it's like the antidote to the pressure that we feel. So like if these lies are like fiery arrows from Satan, like his grace, his power, his mercy is the shield, right, that deflects those things. And so as women of God, like it is our responsibility to have revelations of his character that fill us up to carry us out into the world. And I don't mean that in a cliche way at all. Like I mean that as like getting in the secret place, knowing that he is holy, that he has called you by name, that he loves you, that he says you're a daughter of the king, that he puts a crown on your head, that he clothes you in righteousness, that he sends you out, he commissions you. And God could have any method, right, of transformation on the earth. And yet he chose us. He chose us as his kids to be his agents in the earth. And so like that is our ultimate calling. And so when it comes to the pressure of like, did I do my makeup okay? Like, am I raising my child fine? And I don't even have kids. Neither do you. I don't think so. So like it's tricky to use that example, but even like is my social media like functioning the way that it needs to be? Like, am I making enough like connections? Am I, whatever the thing is, like it is not like we have to submit those thoughts to Christ and then get a revelation of like, it's not that he doesn't care about those things. It's not him being careless about those things. It's him saying like, hey, I have an assignment for you today, and I need that to be on the forefront of your mind. And for my word to be the one filling you up, by my spirit to be filling you up, and not these thoughts about everybody to the left and the right, right? Like it's so much less about what we are thinking and feeling, as much as those thoughts are important and as much as our emotions are valid in a lot of senses. Like it is truly about getting a revelation of Christ. And I think that for Christian women specifically, and I pray for all women who listen to this, right, is the thing that is going to get us to a place of freedom. And that is, I mean, I think that's the whole goal of the Take the Pressure Off message, is to, you take the pressure off so that you can put on freedom, that you can put on his authority. So I hope that isn't like a cliche answer to your question, but it's
so important to have that piece of it, because that's the thing, is like we don't have to work on trying to accept ourselves all the time, because we can that like he has accepted us in our imperfection. Jesus was perfect for us. That righteousness is given to us. Nothing we have to do to try to earn grace, earn acceptance, earn belonging. Like we are, and we can just live out of that place of already being just as we are. And that's the most important part of it. And I would encourage anyone who like knows this as head knowledge and knows like this died for me and like God loves me, and you know, I know the Bible verses about it, but like actually living it out is hard. I would say to get some deeper like counseling. The thing that really ultimately helped me apply the head knowledge that I had, to really talk with someone about it, in a safe place, like all the things I struggled with like body image and just anxiety and pressure. Talking with someone who could help me get to some of the deeper beliefs that I didn't even know were in there, and where those came from, whether it was childhood or, you know, people I grew up with or whatever. Being able to work through that deeper stuff, do the inner work, and let that go. Like once you can kind of work through the stuff that's holding you back, so I feel like you can really walk in freedom. and apply the things you know to be true about yourself, about the Lord,
Yeah.
about other people. So,
Yeah,
Sarah,
that's so good, MK.
thank you so much for
Yeah.
being vulnerable, helping us learn that we can take the pressure off and how to
Yeah.
take the pressure off. I will be sure to put where everyone can find you on Instagram and
That's so
stuff
generous. Thank
in the
you.
description. So everyone go check that out. And Sarah, until next time.
Thanks so much, MK. I appreciate you. Have a great
Well,
rest of your day,
you
guys.
too. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Space for Grace podcast. Be sure to check out the description for any links or resources that were mentioned during this episode. And if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe, share with a friend, and leave a review. I hope you're leaving today educated, inspired, and ready to flourish. This is Space for Grace.